Good evening, welcome back. This is course 3, module 6, and let's summarize this. You already know the drill. Let's not waste any time. We're talking about lesson 1, an introduction to multi-unit dwellings. Okay, let's go. So, the difference between a single family dwelling and a multi-unit dwelling. A dwelling unit is a self-contained living space with one or more habitable rooms containing a minimum kitchen, a bathroom facilities, a sleeping area, entrance, exit from the building. Single-family dwellings have one self-contained dwelling unit or living space, while multi-unit dwellings have more than one. Common terms for multi-unit dwellings are self-contained dwelling unit, multi-family or multiple unit dwellings, secondary units or accessory dwellings, detached, semi-detached row houses with a secondary unit or accessory dwelling unit, duplex, triplex, and fourplex. The key requirements of a multi-unit dwelling. To be a legal multi-unit, the zoning must permit multi-units. The multi-units must comply with all requirements under the Ontario Building Code and the Fire Code. That was lesson 1. Moving on to lesson 2. Special considerations for a property containing a multi-unit dwelling. So, zoning requirements for multi-unit dwellings. The zoning bylaws are unique to each municipality and can change. Due diligence is required by the salesperson to ensure compliance is in place each time multi-unit dwelling is involved. Municipalities throughout the province may approach zoning for additional units differently. Zoning compliance requirements change as the number of dwellings increase. To be identified as a legal unit, all zoning requirements must be met. The Ontario Building Code requirements for multi-unit dwellings. The key Ontario Building Code requirements for residential multi-unit dwellings were identified. Okay, so basically it doesn't really say what the requirements are, but I do hope you read this lesson. I'm gonna go back and see if I can find some good stuff. Okay, so requirements for a building, Ontario Building Code requirements. Let's see if we can find it in this lesson here. Okay, right here. Building code. Okay, so basically the requirements most construction techniques. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So the requirements for the Ontario Building Code are independent entrance and exit, fire separations between units, smoke alarms, natural light, fire separations around common areas, unit size and heating systems, and electrical safety. Let's move on to another page. Let's see what they have here. Okay, so fire code requirements basically mean let's go back. The Ontario Fire Code provides for the safety of occupants in multi-unit dwellings throughout the following: elimination or control of fire hazards in and around the buildings, maintenance of fire safety systems in the building, establishment of a fire safety plan in those buildings wherever necessary. Yeah, so that was the Fire Code. Let's see what they talk about. So the requirements for a multi-unit. The Ontario Fire Code requirements for multi-unit units up to 6 stories. So the section of the Ontario Fire Code sets out requirements including 1. Fire separations between dwellings, 2. Means of escape, separated storage rooms inside the dwelling, hardwired smoke alarms with battery backup in each sleeping room in a home and large building, integrated sprinkler and fire alarm systems, fire extinguishers, fire separation between fueled fire appliance service room and the remainder of the building, stairway separations and exit signs, fire escapes, and emergency lighting. So this is the fire code requirements. And then moving on in this lesson, we will see that we need to know something like okay, I think this was basically it. So yeah, let's move on to lesson 3. Hold on, what was this? Let me see. Okay, yeah, so let's move on to lesson 3. And lesson 3 is requirements for due diligence. So there are a number of documents and information to gather when selling multi-unit properties. You will need to be doing a walkthrough of the units, documenting what you find and discover about the property. And tenancies. This will include the physical condition of the property after conducting a thorough inspection of all units, the terms under which each tenant holds possession of their unit, and the information specifically about the tenant that could impact the marketing and the sale of the property. Obligations. It is important for you to do your due diligence with the information you are giving. You need to ensure what you are giving and what you provide to the potential buyers is verifiable and accurate. The information you obtain from the seller and provide to potential buyers will be what they base their decisions on. Therefore, it is critical that any known immaterial latent facts are disclosed. Lesson 3 was pretty easy. Moving on to lesson 4. So, Residential Tenancies Act giving notice. Gaining entry with and without notice is most relevant to you as a salesperson. The landlord must give 24-hour written notice to a tenant in order to enter their unit to show it to a prospective buyer. Any notice given must include the reason for entry, the day and time. Entry must be between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. When working with a seller, you must clearly state that these requirements to any interested parties. If working with a buyer, take the time to explain that it is likely the case for any multi-unit residential property of interest. Entry without notice can be done if the tenant agreed to it in advance and a reasonable effort has been made to inform them of the intention to show their unit. If working with a seller, ensure there is a written agreement from the tenant to the effect. Also advise any prospective buyers or their representatives if you are unable to inform the tenant of a scheduled showing. Ways to vacant possession. Vacant possession, if needed, can be achieved in 2 ways. One is through an agreement between the tenant and landlord. The other is the buyer or an immediate family member or caregiver can move into the unit and remain there for a period of 12 months. All this must be done without harassment in accordance with the Act. Communications with the tenants. When selling a property with tenants, developing a good relationship with them is in your best interest and best interest of your seller. You want to make sure the process is You want to make the process as easy for tenants as possible by providing notice and being respectful of their time and space. When discussing visits with tenants, advise them to remove any personal or expensive item that they wouldn't want others to see. It is important to be friendly and respectful to all time. It is important to be friendly and respectful at all times, especially when addressing the need to keep the unit clean and tidy for showings. Moving on to lesson 5. Key factors to consider when estimating the value. So, obligations to verify the income and expenses reported by the seller when providing an opinion of value. To estimate a property value, it is important to gather financial information. This includes obtaining both revenue and expenses from the seller with all their supporting documents. Methods of valuation to estimate the value of a property containing a multi-unit dwelling. There are 3 methods of valuation commonly used in the industry. The direct comparison approach is used to value a subject property based on the sale prices of similar properties that have been sold recently after taking into account the differences that exist between the comparable and subject. With the income approach, The goal is to establish which property best compares with your subject property and then use the capitalization rate to help you estimate the value of the property. The multipliers method is used as a quick estimation tool and deals with sale price divided by the effective gross income to give you the gross income multiplier. So the multiplier method is used as a quick estimation tool and deals with the sale price divided by the effective gross income to give you the gross income multiplier. To estimate the value of a property, you would take the effective gross income and multiply it to the income multiplier. Okay, sounds good. Moving on to lesson 6. Considerations when showing a tenanted multi-unit property. So it is your responsibility to ensure that you identify a buyer's intended use of a property. If a buyer is planning to use the unit as unit and needs vacant possession, you need to discuss expectations when selecting properties of interest. You must verify legal information and the financials affecting the property and provide this information to the buyer. Interactions with the tenant while showing a multi-unit dwelling. You must let your buyers know that in accordance with the Residential Tenancies Act, tenants are entitled to be given 24-hour notice in writing before a showing. When viewing a property, you must respect the privacy and personal rights of tenants. Specific rules govern how a buyer can arrange for vacant possession of a tenanted property. When a buyer has entered into an agreement of purchase and sale for a property with no more than 3 units, they may terminate existing tenancies on the grounds when they need the property for personal use. False claims about personal usage are illegal and punishable by fines. The termination date of the tenancy will vary depending on whether the tenancy is month-to-month or fixed terms under a lease agreement. Moving on to lesson 7, considerations for an offer when selling a tenanted property. Ooh, lots of reading here. Okay. Reviewing key aspects by an agreement of purchase and sale. In this first topic of our lesson, you learn how to review an agreement of purchase and sale and identify which typical pre-printed clauses are affected by multi-unit dwellings. You learn that you will use the form for an agreement of purchase and sale for residential properties when selling multi-unit properties with 4 or less units. You reviewed which pre-printed clauses will be affected by multi-unit transactions, including the completed. So these clauses will be affected by the multi-unit transactions. Number 1 is completion date, tenancy versus vacant possession, and number 2, schedules. A tenant may own the appliances. 2 and then 3 fixtures. Tenants may have installed fixtures. 4 documents in discharge. There will be more documents because of confirmations of leases and tenancy agreements, rent deposits. And 5, inspections. You may need inspections for life safety systems. And number 6, adjustments include the calculation for rent held on deposit. Writing clauses for multi-unit dwellings. In addition to the regular residential item, there is a need for additional conditions or clauses when drafting an offer for multi-unit properties. These include permissions to enter and showing, financial information and documents, representation and warranties, vacant possession clauses, tenant leases and rents, including deposits, and rent increases and collections and zoning. You learned what due diligence is needed to gather additional financial information and documents that will accompany the agreements. These documents would include copies of lease, copies of the rent roll, confirmation of deposits and trust, expense history information generally spanning 3 years. And then completing an offer. Before creating an offer, you must use your knowledge for multi-unit specific clauses to create an offer plan, identify required information, calculate figures, establish dates, itemize clauses for Schedule A, obtain additional information required for preparing an offer. Completing an agreement of purchase and sale. The whole offer presentation and acceptance process for a multi-unit, including countering an offer, is similar to a residential property. You reviewed key parts of an offer and identified what conditions and clauses would be needed in the scenario. reviewing how signing would be completed. To complete the process, you identified what would be needed to complete a counter offer, and then complete the acceptance with signatures and copies of documents. Lesson 8 is summary practice activities, and then the whole module summary. Let's see if we find any good information here. Yeah, basically everything we've discussed, but there is some reading that you should do on your own, because the summary was not 100% of this lesson. I believe it was lesson 3. Sorry, yeah, requirements, this number. Okay, that's it for lesson 1 to 7 for module 6. I will be doing module 7 soon. Until then, have a good night. Bye.